Welcome. I'm Julie Bacon, and you're listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast, a podcast for dog handlers who are on a mission to achieve big goals. Here I share lessons, insights, personal stories, and tools you can apply during your next show, trial, or test to help you strengthen your mental game and hopefully cue more consistently. Be sure to check out the show notes where you'll find details about the episodes, plus important links, including the link to the Dogged Planner and Workbook created just for handlers on a mission. So if you're ready to improve your competitive mindset, get out of your own way, and connect with your dog like never before, then it's time to get comfy, bring an open mind, and work your mindset. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Okay, this week we are talking about what's next. And what I mean by that is several my clients recently and just handlers in general are sort of struggling with like what happens once you've achieved your goal or goals or many goals. And it's an interesting question. And I know that some of the initial reaction might be like, oh, that's a big problem to have, like first world problems, like, oh, poor you, you've achieved your goals. But this actually is a real thing that hits, that they've talked about, of course, with like Olympic level athletes and things like that, or people like that, I should say. And they've talked about the fact that like an Olympic athlete who has achieved many of their goals or all of their goals, you know, bring home the gold like 7 times over, what have you, and how afterwards they are depressed or they don't really feel like they have anything to do, or, you know, they just don't fare well in retirement. And of course, in dog sports, we're not talking about retirement, right? We're not talking about hanging up the leash, you know, we're not talking about that necessarily. But what does happen once we achieve the goals that we set for ourselves? And again, some people might be rolling their eyes and be like, that's a great problem to have. And it is a great problem to have. Let's be very clear. It is a wonderful problem to have. It is a great thing to be able to look at your planner or your list of goals and your dreams and see the whole thing crossed off, right? I mean, that is amazing. Or better yet, to have had a great year where you've had to actually write down things on your lifetime list in order to cross them off or check them off, because you didn't even expect that goal was on the table. Like, how wonderful is that? Right? And those are wonderful things. And it doesn't have to be like, you know, nationals, finals level kind of stuff. It can just be with your novice A dog that you never even knew that this sport or that sport were even an option. I mean, that's certainly true of my novice A dog. I started taking him to classes just because I knew he was going to be an unruly boy, and I have big dogs and I didn't want an unruly big dog. And so I just kept going to classes, and finally I would max out at one place, and they said, you know, if you want to keep going, you should go to this place a click above in Virginia, and you should go there and take classes. And I was like, okay, you know, I didn't know what I didn't know. And, you know, I kind of fell through the rabbit hole, I guess, into my personal Alice in Wonderland, because I didn't even know all of that stuff existed. So how wonderful and how lucky was I to have a novice A dog that was just willing to try new things. Like, oh, you want to do obedience? Okay. Oh, agility looks like fun. Okay. You know, and we got to do all these great things. And he was definitely a dog that I didn't even know what was there to accomplish, what sports were there to be played. And I just got very fortunate in landing at a click above. And this is both a shout out to them, but also not, like, because they're amazing. And yeah, I always say that place changed my life forever, because it just gave me the opportunity to see other things that were possible, right? But enough about me. My point in sharing that story is really to say, you know, like sometimes we don't know what's possible until we open ourselves up to try. And so, yeah, it is a really great problem to have when you are, you know, crossing off all of your goals and things that you've accomplished, and maybe even adding some to the list that you didn't even know were possible. That was why I was sharing that story, right? Because I didn't even know what was possible. And then, of course, with the next dog, I had things that were really possible, and so on and so forth, right? And we keep dreaming bigger, and we keep pushing ourselves. And thankfully, you know, unlike maybe an Olympic athlete that only is going to, you know, swim for so many years or do gymnastics for so many years or, whatever the sport is, we can do many years, many dogs, hopefully, with our sports, with dog sports, right? We've had many dogs. We hopefully will have multiple dogs going forward, and we'll be able to do this. We all know, I call them age idols, right? Those people that you're like, I want to still be running when I'm at that age. And it's really super possible for us, right? So that's part of it, is that, every year the sport is evolving, new sports, new opportunities are coming. If our dogs are getting older, there are now new sports that we can do with those dogs, right? That's how I discovered scent work originally. I discovered it as a way to do it kind of a retirement sport for my agility dog. And actually she was a lot more than just agility, but when she retired from that, I found her sport, started doing scent work, and now all of my dogs do scent work because I just think it's really fun and interesting, right? So we're constantly evolving and trying new sports and going out into new ventures, right? So that is part of it. That's part of, I think, the joy and the kind of motivation really in dog sports, is that there is no finish line. There is no that's it. You've done all the things, cross it all off. There are other venues, in the US, you have AKC, you have USDAA, you have UKC, you have, I can't even list them, right? I don't know them all probably, but also there are just that many that it just is unrealistic to list them all. Okay. But going back to the original point, while this is all very related, I think, going back to the original point, I do have some clients who have said look, this is what I wanted to accomplish with this dog and I did it. And now what? And I do think that's interesting. And I do think that, yes, while it's a wonderful problem to have, I think it's more common than we let on, because I think there is some, I don't know, maybe some I don't want to say stigma, that's too harsh of a word, or I don't know, maybe just people don't feel comfortable saying, sitting next to their dog and, talking in a group of friends and being like, oh, Fifi and I have already accomplished everything I set out to do, and I think maybe it feels like bragging, or maybe it feels awkward, or maybe you're trying to be sensitive of other people's feelings. Someone else is having a really bad day and it's really not the time to say that you've accomplished all of your dreams. And so I just think people don't talk about it enough, but I do think it's out there. I do think it's happening. I do think there are more teams than we realize that are in this moment. And it is almost depression inducing in some people. It causes really a shift in motivation. Some people are like, well, am I still training? Am I still going as hard? Am I still entering? Now what do I do with myself? Right? Especially if they don't have a young dog coming up or some other thing driving them forward. It can be kind of give you a kind of a very lost feeling, right? In the US here, we're just coming off of the Agility Nationals that were held in Georgia this year. And some people were like, yeah, after this, I don't know what my next goal is, And for them, that was it. That was okay, I'm going to nationals and that's it. Or that's it for this dog. And I don't know what's happening for this dog afterwards. I have another younger dog, but am I retiring my dog? What's going to happen? So I've laid out enough scenarios. Now let's start to think about what we can do about it. All right, be right back. Quick question. Do you ever wish you had more mindset help? Well, the Q membership was created just for that reason. Every month we pick a topic, and then we have 4 lessons, which are kind of like these podcasts, that we dive deeper into. And so if you are ready for more, you're ready for more mindset work, think about joining the Q membership. Annual members get a free coaching session, but you can also choose the monthly option as well. Go to theqcoach.com to learn more. Let's get back to the episode. Okay, so we get it. We're trying to figure out, how do we stay motivated when we have done the things we came to do? And maybe that is for that dog, right? So there are a couple things that I always coach clients on. The first is stepping back and saying, okay, this dog aside, right? First, congratulations, right? Make sure that you are celebrating this in the way that you deserve, to be highlighting it and doing something for yourself. If that's not public, at least privately, figure out how you are going to commemorate these amazing moments, right? Get really good at celebrating, right? Get really good at celebrating your wins. And again, if you're not comfortable doing that in public, do that in private. Commemorate it somehow. Buy a new collar, get some beautiful ribbon or something framed, or, do something that will, every time you see that thing, it will remind you of the great accomplishment. Okay. I'm a big believer in that. I do this thing where I go to, like a Michael's or one of those things, buy the shadow box, which they're very often on sale, by the way. And, arrange ribbons and things and like back numbers from big finals or something like that in a shadow box, right? Very inexpensive, very easy to do. And plus, like, who doesn't love using a glue gun? Of course. But so commemorate it in some way. Make sure you are celebrating. All right. So that said, then I want you to step back and I want you to ask yourself, only as your handler. So dog aside, as a handler, what else do you want to learn? Like, what is next for you? Where do you want to get better in your handling? Where do you want to improve? What are there skills that you wish you had? Like, no, maybe you don't need them when you're running this dog, but maybe you want to keep getting better, right? Every sport that I could rattle off, from agility to obedience to rally to barn hunt to everything, any sport I could rattle off right now, there is always a next level of skills for handlers. Now, sometimes we look at our dogs and we're like, well, our dogs accomplish so much, or, they're never gonna, I'm saying this more because it was a personal joke with one of my dogs. My dog's never going to need a backside. She hated backside. She would literally stop dead. Like, she would just stop and stare at me and she's like, I'm not doing this. Like, this is not happening. And so we never learned that. But as a handler, that's a skill I want to have, right? I want to be able to handle to those kinds of levels, right? And by the way, this was years ago when they weren't as common, whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I'm off topic. But point being is I want you to step back and I want you to look at yourself as a handler and ask yourself, but what do I want to accomplish? What skills do I still need? What would I like to learn? How am I going to level up my game so I'm even better for the next dog or the next goal? All right. And then maybe say, well, is there a way that I can work on this with this current dog? With this dog who's accomplished everything, maybe we start entering different classes or start shifting, or I start working on this skill with them in training, or pushing myself more or differently in competition, right? What else can I be doing? The other thing, when you get to a point where you've checked off all the things, and this is especially helpful if your dog now is of an age where they're like, maybe they were an agility dog and, they're 10 or 11, God willing, and they're just not, running as fast, or maybe they're not as sound as they used to be, or, because I firmly believe that, like all of us, we only have so many jumps in us, right? And so how you start to manage that as your dog's age, is really important. So is there another sport your dog wants to play? Is there something else that you both want to try? Is there something you want to try and you want to see your dog is game to do it with you? So is there a sport that interests you that you want to learn on? There's nothing like taking that, kind of old comfortable slipper. Let's say they were really successful in agility or obedience or something, and then you take that relationship and you apply everything that you've developed in that relationship to a new sport. It's amazing how much faster you both pick it up because the relationship is there, right? That relationship is so deep. You know how to teach, they know how to learn. You have unspoken language and all of that great stuff, and then you can just kind of apply that. Right. And so I think that's really interesting too, to take on new sports. Like I said, especially when, dogs are nearing retirement age, or they just can't do their sport in the same way or with the same gusto, as they once did. Perfect. There's lots of great things to go do. Okay. And then, the other thing is figure out what the sport can look like and you still have as much fun as you always have had. Right. And notice I'm not saying like, go get a new dog, right? Because some of us have multiple dogs, some of us don't, some of us aren't there yet. Like there's a lot of different places. And so I don't want you just to like, oh, sorry, we accomplished everything with this dog, on to the next dog. I actually am not advocating for that. What I'm advocating is that you make sure that you find something that you both can work toward, that makes you a better handler, that is there for the relationship, that you still connect with your dog, still have that great bond, still have that great fun. I've never known a successful, working, competing dog that didn't want to keep working, right? They might not be able to work in the way that they could, but they want to. Their heart wants to so badly. So I feel like as handlers, we kind of owe it to them to figure out what is next. So when we go back to that thought of like, oh, we've accomplished everything, that's almost like depressing because you don't know what's next. My challenge back to you is think harder about it. There is a what's next. Like, what are you willing to do? What do you want to do as a handler? Where do you want to go? How do you want to advance your wonderful relationship that you've developed over all of these years and all of these trials and all of these green ribbons? Like, where do you want that to go still? And what does that look like for you? And, the truth of it is it's going to look different. Probably in some way, it might be a different sport, maybe it's your secondary or tertiary, sport. It's not your primary, but it is still something that you guys can do together and connect with, and is still going to be a challenge, right? When I transitioned my very successful dog to scent work in her older years, it was a new challenge for both of us, right? And it was hard again, right? And I think that's part of what we miss. Is, as much as we always say we wish it was easy, we really don't. We miss the challenge. We miss learning new things. We miss putting ourselves out there. We miss kind of when it was hard. And so to find another challenge that can replace that, it's kind of an adrenaline thing, or it's kind of just that energy thing of just pushing and having something on the line, to recreate that in another way, I think is really important. I think, for me, the biggest thing that always drives me is I want to always be getting better as a handler. So if my dog is not going to play the sport anymore, or if, we've accomplished everything there was to accomplish in the sport, but they still want to run. So let's say an agility dog has their mocks and pucks and whatever, but we still want to run them. Well, maybe I'm going to enter different classes, or, maybe I'm going to make myself go do Premier or play games classes or something else, that is going to challenge me as a handler. And I can walk into that ring, not quote caring necessarily about the outcome, because now my goal is to push myself as a handler, for instance, right? And I think that's the way that our sport stays interesting. We stay engaged with our dogs, and we keep pushing ourselves to be better, to level up, to get into that next evolution of a handler that we know we can be. Maybe it's even online classes, learning new things, learning new handling skills, maybe getting into behavior or getting into health or wellness or something like that. Like there's always new ways to be pushing ourselves. So the first thing is kind of take a step back and assess and see what it is that you even want to do and how you want to improve and where you want to go as a handler. And then, take it from there, let your heart take it from there. I think too, what happens sometimes is after a really big push, like you're really pushing to get to nationals or you're really pushing for something, sometimes you just need a break, and that's okay too. And you get to take a break and you need to regroup. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, all right, break's over. Like I miss, competing. I got to get back to work. I got to get back to it. And I think that kind of finding what's next for you is really important to keeping you motivated and hungry to learn. Maybe not hungry to win, but maybe hungry to learn and to figure out what's next. So I do think there's a next for everybody, right? I mean, we're not all gonna like retire and become commentators, right? So I do think there's a next for everybody. I just think you have to be willing to open up to the possibilities and then figure out if that's something you want to do. I think when people don't have a what's next, or they get kind of we're going to say depressed, but not maybe clinically, hopefully, that it's because they haven't found the thing that lights them up. And I will say that's kind of a two-edged thing. One side of that is, nothing is going to light you up in exactly the same way, maybe as your preferred sport. But also it took you years to get to that point too, right? You didn't just wake up one day and be really freaking great at dog sports and be like, I'm super awesome at this, right? You worked hard at it. It maybe didn't light you up in the beginning and then you got kind of into it, right? So that's part one is your next thing might not immediately be obvious, right? And so keep that in mind as you're looking to that kind of next adventure is, it might not feel the same. Okay. And then the second the second part of that is you don't really necessarily want to be new at something. So it's because it's uncomfortable to start over again. You're kind of in that zone where you're torn between being really freaking good at something and, having all the accolades and accomplishing all the things to going all the way maybe to something brand new and being bad at it again. And so sometimes that doesn't excite you because it doesn't carry the same amount of adrenaline. So think about what it is that you miss about, or what you think you're going to miss, right? As you accomplish your next thing or all the things rather, and you're looking for that next thing. And what is your next step? And just get really curious and know that there is something, you just haven't found it yet, potentially. Okay. So like we started with, it's a great problem to have. I hope all of you experience that problem at least once in your life where you have to figure out what's next. And I'm very confident that you will, because we all know we are addicted to dog sports for life. So it just is what it is. And like I always say, no matter what you're doing this week with your dog, I hope you have a fantastic week. Thanks so much for listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast with me, Julie Bacon. I am so grateful for your precious time. Check out my Dogged Planner workbook and journal available on Amazon. Just search for Dogged Planner. I also offer monthly membership that's perfect for ongoing support of your awesome goals. Check out theqcoach.com for details, or just stop by and check out all the ways you can work on your mindset. And be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at theqcoach and let me know how it's going. Finally, please share, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps us podcasters tremendously. Plus, I know I get my best podcast recommendations from friends. Thanks, and have a great week with your dogs.